Should you talk about having a really bad semester or start to your pre-med career in your primary application? So there used to be a essay on the primary app called the disadvantaged student essay, where you could talk about if you had some sort of disadvantaged background, whether that was financial hardships you've had to overcome. And also you could tie that into if there's been difficulties with, let's say, when you were starting off and maybe your grades weren't as good as they were hoping to be. However, now there is a impactful experience essay, which changed in 2024 in that application cycle. And this is now where, if you wanted to, in your primary application, you can write about, for example, having a really bad semester that pulled down your GPA. So I get asked this question a lot by pre-med students. Should I talk about it? If so, what should I say? So here's what I would say to that. If you have a very good reason and explanation for why you had maybe a semester where it was mostly C's or withdrawal, then you can write about it. If you don't and you're just fishing for an answer to make an excuse, then I would avoid drawing attention to a bad semester, especially if that semester was early on in the process and you've had a improving GPA and an upward trend. That'll speak for itself. Let's not draw extra attention to the bad semester. So some people do have good reasons. For example, let's say you had a death in the family and that was a very hard time. You ended up having to withdraw from a class. The other class you couldn't withdraw from because it was too late, but you still got a bad grade. It was very hard to focus. That is understandable. This happens. And again, ideally, you should still, if you had to deal with something like this, you could talk to the advisors. Maybe you're withdrawing. Maybe you can get being excused from the semester. But let's say it was too late. You already had the bad grades. That's something you can talk about. And that would be an example of when you may want to bring it up. Now, if you have W's on your transcript or C's, a lot of times secondary essays are going to ask you anyway to address it. So you might not even need to write it in the primary because you're most likely going to write that essay in the secondaries anyway. However, I do see a lot of students, they'll try to write this essay where it's really not a specific reason. And you could tell that they're just trying to make some sort of excuses for why they were doing poorly during certain semesters. And it's also especially hard if it was like different semesters, right? Maybe it was the first semester and then second semester, sophomore year, and then one more like junior or senior year. And you have an excuse for all three of those semesters. Now it just sounds like you're not taking ownership and responsibility of poor grades. And so you definitely want to avoid that. So if you have one semester or one specific thing here or there, whether it was a class or a withdrawal, whatever it is that you can talk about with a legitimate reason, great. You could write the essay. And if you want help with that, you can click the link below, reach out to us. We can talk about some of our services that help with that, as well as the whole application process. But if it's just you really searching for excuses, I highly recommend just avoid the essay altogether, because you're better off not drawing attention to something. You might not have, maybe that admissions committee member who was reading your app, they may not have even realized that you had a really poor freshman year semester because they're just looking at your GPA in totality, which is much better now. So again, let's not draw unnecessary attention, but if you have legitimate reasons, you definitely can write the essay. Now, if you're going to write the essay, what's important to think about? Well, first, we don't want this essay to be a woe is me essay, and we don't want this essay to just sound like you're making excuses. If you did poorly, sometimes you just have to own up to it and take responsibility, show how you've learned from it, grown, and not how you're going to grow, but ideally you've already grown from it. So you say, this is what I learned. Subsequently, I took these steps, and that's why since then I've been getting consistently a 3.7 or above GPA. So that's going to look a lot better than if you don't have that growth, and that's why that growth is so important. And so if you haven't had that growth yet, well, now you may want to consider doing a post-bac or additional classes if you're already a senior or further as a pre-med student. Again, this is the type of stuff we help with in our mentorship program. If you want some advice on what to do next, if you're not sure if you're ready to apply, feel free to reach out. But I hope this answers the question of, should I write about the impactful experience essay? Should I bring attention to poor semesters here or there? And if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. And we're going to be coming out with more helpful pre-med mentorship content every single week.